The murmur of alien voices filled the chamber, an orchestra of disdain. Liam heard their whispers, amplified by the acoustic design of the hall, as clearly as if they'd been spoken directly into his ear. Primitive species. Why are they even here? They tremble at the thought of war. How could they ever contribute to galactic stability? Perhaps they're just here for entertainment. Liam stood motionless, his face a mask of calm professionalism. He was unarmed, dressed in a simple black suit tailored to blend into the council's formal atmosphere. Yet there was a quiet intensity about him, a presence that defied the mockery surrounding him. His piercing gray eyes, flecked with hints of steel blue, scanned the room, meeting the gaze of any who dared to sneer. Most quickly looked away. At the head of the assembly, Supreme Arbiter Zeldar, a towering being encased in crystalline armor, raised a segmented limb to command silence. The voices fell away, leaving the chamber eerily quiet. When Zeldar spoke, his voice reverberated like a melody forged in glass. Earth has been invited to this council as a probationary member, despite its limited influence. We gathered today to evaluate their worthiness through a simulated test of diplomacy and military strategy. A ripple of amusement swept through the delegates. Liam's jaw tightened imperceptibly, though his expression remained composed. Commander Roy, Zeldar continued, your people's history is riddled with conflict, yet you now claim to value peace above all else. Explain how a species so defined by war believes it can contribute to galactic harmony. Liam stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking softly against the crystalline floor. He took a moment to let the silence settle, a subtle power move that unsettled some of the more impatient delegates. Arbiter, he began, his voice steady, Earth's history is indeed marked by conflict, but it's also a testament to resilience, innovation, and the ability to learn from our mistakes. We understand war not as an abstract concept, but as a reality that has shaped us. That understanding drives our commitment to peace. A sharp laugh echoed from the far side of the chamber. The sound came from Verixa, a serpentine delegate coiled atop her dais, her golden scales catching the light. Commitment to peace? She hissed, her voice dripping with mockery. Is that what you call your fear? Your species hides behind treaties and talks, too weak to defend itself. Liam turned his gaze to her, unflinching. Fear, he said quietly, is not the absence of courage. It's the foundation of it. Only those who know fear can truly conquer it. The council stirred, unsettled by his calm defiance. Verixa opened her mouth to retort, but Zeldar silenced her with a raised limb. Enough, the Arbiter commanded. Actions speak louder than words. We have prepared a war simulation to assess Earth's strategic capabilities. Commander Roy, are you prepared to proceed? Liam nodded, his face unreadable. Earth is always prepared. The Arbiter's crystalline body emitted a soft hum, signaling the activation of the simulation. Holographic displays materialized around the chamber, depicting a stylized map of the Milky Way. A fleet of alien ships began to converge on Earth's position. The simulation was designed to mimic an overwhelming invasion, a scenario meant to test Earth's capacity for response under extreme pressure. As the holograms shifted and expanded, the council's focus shifted with them. The delegates leaned forward, their disdain giving way to curiosity. Liam remained still, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the unfolding scene with an almost detached air. From the corner of the chamber, an older delegate, Craction of the Umberland Coalition, leaned toward his companion. His multi-eyed face betrayed a flicker of unease. He's too calm, Craction murmured. Does he not understand the stakes, or is there something we're missing? Liam caught the whispered remark, but gave no indication. Instead, he allowed a faint smile to touch his lips. The simulation advanced rapidly. Earth's holographic forces appeared pitiful against the vast armadas bearing down on them. Alien delegates smirked and exchanged knowing glances, certain of the simulation's outcome. Then Liam spoke, his voice cutting to the growing hum of amusement. Pause the simulation. The command was so unexpected that even Zeldar hesitated before complying. The holograms froze mid-motion, and all eyes turned to the human diplomat. Liam stepped forward, his movements deliberate, shedding the outer jacket of his suit as he did so. The council gasped as the stark black ink of his tattoo came into view, a phoenix entwined with the globe of Earth, etched across his left forearm. "I am not just a diplomat," Liam began, his voice low but laced with barely contained fury. "I was a soldier, a survivor of Earth's darkest war. While you sat in your ivory towers debating philosophy, we fought to the brink of annihilation and clawed our way back." The chamber fell silent, the delegates transfixed. Liam's words were not a boast but a declaration of fact, delivered with the gravity of someone who had lived through hell and come out the other side. "You think us weak because we value peace," he continued, "but it's precisely because we understand the horrors of war that we cherish it. If you believe that makes us vulnerable, I suggest you reconsider." Without waiting for a response, he turned back to the frozen simulation. "Resume." The holograms flickered back to life, but now there was an edge of uncertainty in the room. As the alien fleets closed in on Earth's position, Liam's calm exterior betrayed none of the storm brewing beneath the surface. The council watched rapt as the human envoy stood at the precipice of defeat, his intentions unreadable. And in the quiet corners of the chamber, doubt began to creep into even the most arrogant minds. They would soon learn that the beast they believed dormant was merely waiting. The stillness of the chamber did little to quiet the storm raging in Liam Roy's mind. As the simulation progressed, with Earth's holographic forces appearing laughably outmatched, memories he had long buried began to claw their way back to the surface. He could almost smell the acrid smoke of burning cities, feel the ground tremble under the relentless bombardment, hear the desperate cries of those who had looked to him for salvation. Liam's fingers brushed against the edge of his tattoo, a habit he had developed years ago, one that anchored him when the weight of his past threatened to overwhelm. The intricate ink was not merely a symbol. It was a scar, a declaration of survival, and a grim reminder of the price humanity had paid to earn its place among the stars. Earth's darkest war had begun as so many others had, over resources. The Resource Wars, as they were later named, had erupted when the planet's dwindling supplies of rare earth metals pushed the world's superpowers to the brink. At first, it had been a war of technology, fought with drones and precision strikes. But as the conflict escalated, technology gave way to desperation. Nations unleashed weapons they had sworn never to use, and the boundaries between enemy and ally blurred in the chaos. Liam had been a young officer then, freshly graduated from a military academy that no longer exists. He remembered the idealism that had burned in his chest when he first donned the uniform, the belief that he could make a difference. That belief had died quickly, snuffed out by the cold reality of war. He had been stationed in Berlin during the siege of Europe, a campaign so brutal that historians still debated whether it had been a military operation or an exercise in annihilation. The skies had been choked with ash, turning day into a perpetual twilight. Civilians, soldiers, and machines alike had fallen in droves, their bodies indistinguishable under layers of soot and rubble. Liam had led what remained of his unit through the shattered streets, scavenging supplies and fending off attacks from enemies who were just as desperate as they were. But it wasn't the battles that haunted him most. It was the silence afterward, the oppressive, deafening stillness that followed the screams. The silence of a world teetering on the edge of oblivion. The Resource Wars had culminated in a single event that reshaped the course of human history. Project Wrath, conceived in the darkest hours of the conflict, was humanity's ultimate weapon, a system designed to harness Earth's very core to fuel its destructive power. The weapon had been tested only once, during the final battle over the Pacific Rim. Liam had been there, aboard one of the last operational naval carriers, watching as the sky itself seemed to split apart under the weapon's fury. The energy unleashed had obliterated not only the enemy fleet, but also the tectonic stability of the region. Entire islands were swallowed by the sea, and the survivors were left to rebuild a world scarred by their own desperation. Liam had barely escaped with his life, his ship caught in the shockwave and torn apart like paper. He still bore the physical scars of that day, thin, jagged lines that ran across his torso and arms, hidden beneath his clothing. But the emotional scars were far deeper. The war had ended shortly after Project Wrath's deployment, not because of any treaty or victory, but because there was simply nothing left to fight for. The last battalion, of which Liam had been a part, became the stuff of legend. They were the ones who had held the line when all seemed lost, who had borne witness to humanity's darkest hour and emerged alive, if not whole. The tattoo he wore was their mark, a phoenix rising from the ashes of a dying world. It was a symbol of rebirth, but also a warning. The flames that had forged them could consume the galaxy if ever unleashed again. Now, standing in the Galactic Council's chamber, Liam felt the weight of that history pressing down on him. These alien leaders, so quick to mock Earth's fear of war, had no idea what fear truly was. They had never fought for their survival with the desperation of a species on the brink. They had never looked into the eyes of an enemy and seen their own reflection staring back. A flicker of movement in the hologram drew his attention. The simulation was nearing its climax, with Earth's forces hopelessly overwhelmed. Delegates whispered among themselves, their voices a blend of pity and contempt. Varix's serpentine form undulated with smug satisfaction as she leaned closer to one of her peers. "I told you," she hissed, "they're weak. All talk and no teeth." Liam's lips tightened into a thin line. He could feel the pulse of his heartbeat in his temple, steady and controlled. He let their derision wash over him, knowing it would make what came next all the more impactful. Project Wrath had been classified at the highest level of secrecy after the war. Only a handful of people on Earth knew it still existed, hidden deep beneath the planet's surface, dormant but fully operational. Its activation required biometric clearance from the highest-ranking officials, a precaution against its misuse. Liam had not needed to use it in decades. He prayed he never would, but as the simulation unfolded, he found himself wondering whether these alien leaders could understand the price humanity had paid without seeing the full extent of what they had once been capable of. He let his hand drop from his tattoo and clenched it into a fist at his side. Memories of the war surged within him. Faces of comrades long gone, their laughter, their screams. He thought of the civilians who had looked to him for protection, and the countless others who had perished when he failed. Those memories were his burden to bear, but they were also his strength. They reminded him why he stood here now, representing a species that refused to be broken. The simulation froze again, awaiting the council's verdict. Delegates turned expectantly toward Zeldar, whose crystalline form glowed faintly as he prepared to deliver his assessment. But before he could speak, Liam stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You don't understand," he said, his tone low but unwavering. "You see fear as a weakness, something to mock. But fear is what has kept us alive. Fear of annihilation. Fear of extinction. And fear," he said, his eyes sweeping over the gathered delegates, "is what should be keeping you alive right now." The chamber fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the room like a shroud. Liam's gaze locked with Zeldar's, and for the first time, the Arbiter hesitated. In that moment, Liam knew the Council was beginning to understand. They were beginning to fear, and that, he thought grimly, was only the beginning. The simulation resumed with an eerie precision, the alien fleets closing in on Earth's holographic defenses like predators circling wounded prey. The council chamber buzzed with anticipation, the delegates leaning forward to watch the inevitable conclusion. For all their advanced technology and posturing, humanity's forces seemed woefully outmatched. Liam Roy stood unmoving, his face carved from stone. His presence was a quiet defiance against the murmurs of scorn filling the air. In his mind, the room faded, replaced by the battlefield memories that had shaped him. This was not the first time he had stood in the shadow of overwhelming odds. He knew the weight of hopelessness, the cold bite of despair, and he knew how to wield both as weapons. The holographic representation of Earth, a blue and green marble suspended in the dark void, shrank under the advancing alien forces. Orbital stations and satellite defenses erupted in bursts of simulated fire, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the assault. The delegates chuckled and exchanged smug glances. They were already drafting their diplomatic reprimands in their minds, certain that humanity's participation in the Council would end as swiftly as it had begun. Liam finally moved, a single step forward that echoed in the chamber. The sound was sharp, cutting through the quiet murmur of alien voices. "Magnify Sector Delta," he said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of command. The Arbiter hesitated, crystalline eyes narrowing. Then, with a nod, the hologram shifted. The view zoomed in on a sector of Earth's orbit that appeared devoid of activity. Empty space. Or so it seemed. "What are you playing at, human?" Varixa hissed from her dais, her golden scales catching the ambient light. "Your forces are crumbling, and you choose to waste time examining." "Silence," Liam said sharply, his tone brooking no argument. The sheer authority in his voice startled the delegates into stunned quiet. He raised a hand and with a gesture, input a command into the console embedded in his dais. A pulse of energy rippled through the holograms, and suddenly, the simulation changed. The seemingly empty sector erupted with activity. A fleet of human vessels, their design sleek and alien to the Council's understanding, emerged from their cloaked positions. Unlike the outdated ships that had been decimated moments earlier, these were precision-crafted machines of war, bristling with weaponry that shimmered ominously in the simulated starlight. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Delegates leaned forward, their disbelief palpable. "What is this?" Zeldar demanded, his voice rising above the din. "The pass," Liam said, his tone measured, his eyes hard as steel. "A reminder of what we are capable of when survival is on the line." The fleet moved with a terrifying synchronicity, their formations calculated, their movements a deadly dance of strategy and efficiency. As the alien armadas converged, the human vessels responded with precision strikes. Energy beams and kinetic weapons tore through the invading forces with brutal efficiency, each strike calculated to maximize devastation. The Council watched in stunned silence as the tide of the battle turned in an instant. Liam's hands rested lightly on the edges of his console, his posture deceptively relaxed. Inside, his mind was a storm of calculations, memories, and carefully controlled rage. "During our darkest hour," he began, his voice carrying over the simulated chaos, "humanity created weapons we vowed never to use again. Weapons so devastating that their very existence became a secret guarded by a handful of leaders. You look at Earth and see a fragile world. But what you fail to understand is that fragility breeds ingenuity. Desperation breeds strength." As if to underscore his point, the simulation escalated. One of the holographic human vessels activated a weapon that sent a pulse of energy rippling through space. Alien ships caught in its path disintegrated, their molecular structures destabilized in an instant. The Council recoiled, the sheer violence of the display unlike anything they had ever witnessed. What is this technology?" Craxton stammered, his multi-eyed face betraying genuine fear. "It's called Wrath," Liam said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Born from the fires of our last great war, it was humanity's final act of desperation. A system designed to turn the resources of our planet into weapons of unparalleled destruction. We hope to bury it forever, but sometimes hope isn't enough." The simulation continued, the human fleet now pressing the attack. Alien ships attempted to regroup, their commanders issuing frantic orders to counter the unexpected threat. But it was too late. The holographic Earth was no longer a vulnerable target. It was a vengeful force, striking with the precision of a predator long underestimated. Liam turned to face the Council, his gaze sweeping over the gathered delegates. For the first time, he saw not disdain or amusement but fear. "You think humanity is weak because we value peace," he said, his tone sharp as a blade. "But that peace is not born of naivety. It is born of necessity. We know the cost of war better than any of you could ever imagine, and we know that if we are pushed, we will do whatever it takes to survive." Zeldar rose from his dais, his crystalline body shimmering with agitation. "You threaten the Council with these relics of destruction? This is not diplomacy, human. This is madness." Liam met his gaze without flinching. "No, Arbiter. This is a warning. Humanity does not seek war. We do not crave power or conquest. But make no mistake. If you awaken the beast, you will face the full weight of what we've endured, and you will not survive it." The simulation reached its conclusion. The alien armadas lay in ruins, their once mighty fleets reduced to debris drifting through the void. The human vessels withdrew, their holographic engines igniting as they returned to their cloaked positions. Earth stood alone in the simulation, unbroken and defiant. The chamber was silent. Delegates exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier confidence shattered. Varixa coiled tightly, her golden scales dull under the weight of her unease. Craxion's many eyes blinked in rapid succession, his composure visibly shaken. Liam straightened, his expression unreadable. The storm inside him had subsided, replaced by a cold clarity. He had shown them enough. "Earth does not fear war," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "But you should." With that, he stepped back, his presence looming even in stillness. The simulation's remnants flickered and faded, leaving the chamber in a heavy, oppressive quiet. The Council now understood, perhaps too late, that the beast they had mocked was no longer sleeping. The silence in the chamber was suffocating, thick with unspoken fears and shattered pride. Liam Roy stood unmoving, a solitary figure among the alien delegates, who now seemed far less imposing. The simulation had ended, but its impact lingered, etched into the stunned expressions of every council member. Zeldar, ever the arbiter of reason, was the first to speak. His crystalline body refracted the chamber's dim light, the once vivid glow now dulled. "You've made your point, human," he said, his voice wavering. "But surely this wrath is a relic of a bygone era. You would not dare to use such devastation in this age." Liam's expression didn't change, but his eyes grew colder, sharper. "You misunderstand," he said evenly. "The wrath isn't a threat. It's a reminder. You questioned humanity's resolve, mocked our history, and dismissed our fears as weakness. What I've shown you today is not a promise of violence. It's the cost of underestimating us." The delegates shifted uneasily, the weight of Liam's words pressing against their ingrained arrogance. Varixa, who had been the loudest in her disdain, now curled tightly within herself, her golden scales dimmed to a sullen bronze. Even Craxion, with his many unblinking eyes, avoided meeting Liam's gaze. "Your species thrives on destruction," Varixa hissed finally, though her tone lacked the venom it once carried. "How can we trust a race that wields such barbaric tools? What guarantee do we have that you won't turn that monstrosity against us?" Liam stepped forward, the sound of his boots echoing in the hushed chamber. His calm demeanor belied the simmering intensity in his voice. "Trust is earned," he said, "and so is respect. Humanity did not seek out this council to intimidate or dominate. We came here to join, to contribute. But if your respect must be bought with the ghosts of our past, so be it." He turned his gaze toward Zeldar, addressing the Arbiter directly. "You claim to represent unity, yet you mock those who come to you in peace. You sit here, in this sanctified hall, far removed from the struggles of survival. You don't understand what it means to claw your way back from the brink of extinction, but humanity does." The room seemed to shrink under the gravity of his words. Liam could see the cracks forming in their collective hubris, the realization that their superiority was not as unassailable as they believed. Zeldar's crystalline body pulsed faintly, a flicker of uncertainty breaking through his composed facade. "If humanity's goal is peace," he said cautiously, "then surely there is a better way to foster understanding than this display." Liam inclined his head, acknowledging the Arbiter's attempt to regain control. "We sought understanding," he said. What we received was mockery. You assumed we were weak because we carry the burden of fear. But fear isn't a weakness. It's a teacher. It reminds us of what's at stake and what we stand to lose. And it's what makes us willing to do whatever it takes to protect our home. The holographic display flickered back to life, unprompted. This time, it showed Earth as it was now. A vibrant world of cities and forests, oceans teeming with life, skies crisscrossed by the trails of spacecraft. The image was peaceful, almost serene, but there was an undercurrent of resilience, a quiet strength that could not be ignored. We are not the same people who fought the resource wars, Liam continued, his voice softer but no less firm. We rebuilt, we learned, and we vowed to never let fear drive us to the brink again. But we have not forgotten what it taught us. Varixa shifted, her golden eyes narrowing. And what exactly did it teach you, human? Liam's gaze bore into hers unflinching. That peace is fragile, that it must be protected not just with words, but with the resolve to act when necessary. You think of us as dangerous because we've mastered the art of survival. But perhaps it's time you consider what you would do if your worlds were threatened as ours once were. The room fell silent again, the weight of Liam's challenge settling over the council. He could see the discomfort in their postures, the uncertainty in their expressions. They were beginning to understand, if only in fragments. Zeldar raised a crystalline hand, signaling for order. Enough, he said, his voice steadying. What you have shown us today is troubling, but it is also enlightening. Humanity's history is not one we would wish to see repeated, but it is clear that your people have learned from it in ways we cannot ignore. Liam inclined his head slightly, his stance unwavering. The Arbiter's crystalline body pulsed faintly as he continued. The Galactic Council is not without its flaws. Perhaps we have grown complacent in our security, blind to the struggles of those who have faced true extinction. Your presence here has reminded us that peace cannot be taken for granted. The admission hung in the air, a rare moment of vulnerability from the council's leader. The delegates murmured among themselves, their earlier disdain replaced with cautious consideration. Liam stepped back, his mission complete. He had no illusions that the council would change overnight, but he had planted the seeds of understanding, however small. You came here to prove humanity's worth, Zeldar said, addressing Liam directly. And while your methods are unconventional, you have succeeded. The Council will take what we've seen today under serious advisement. But know this, should humanity ever misuse the power you've revealed, the consequences will be dire. Liam nodded once, his expression unreadable. We understand the stakes, Arbiter, and we have no intention of repeating the mistakes of our past. But neither will we allow anyone to threaten our future. With those final words, Liam turned and began to leave the chamber. As he walked, the weight of his past pressed against him, but so too did the resolve that had carried him through countless battles. He had faced humanity's darkest hours and emerged stronger. Whatever lay ahead, he knew his people were ready. The massive doors of the council chamber closed behind him with a resonant finality. Inside, the delegates remained silent, their thoughts heavy with the warning they had just received. And outside, far beyond the council's reach, Earth remained as it always had, watchful, resilient, and unyielding. The sleeping beast had stirred, but it had not yet roared.